Well, hello everyone, and welcome in. This is episode 2 of the Panzer, as this cheesy little introduction shows. Let's get to it. Well, this episode has a lot to do about painting. First, we're going to lay down the base colors, and then we're going to add some camouflage colors, and then we'll do some chipping towards the end. But before that, let's pick up where our history lesson left off last time. As mentioned in the last episode, it was the 1st Ranger Battalion that captured this little Panzer II, and then subsequently started taking it for joy rides around the local area. In July of 1943, the 1st Ranger Battalion took part in the invasion of Sicily, and later the campaign in Italy. We do know that this little Panzer II was sent back to the United States to the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, where it was tested and evaluated, and then sat on display at Aberdeen for the next few decades. In 1989, the Aberdeen Museum was contacted by the Auto and Technik Museum in Germany. The loan included a Tiger I, a Martyr II, and this Panzer II. The loan to Germany lasted for about 10 years, at which time the vehicles were returned back to the United States, and now this Panzer II is sitting in display at the museum at Fort Benning, Georgia. And as Paul Harvey would say, now you know the rest of the story. At least for me, learning the history, if possible, about the subjects that I'm building, well, that's half the joy of modeling. However, this really is a channel about skill modeling, so we should probably get back to it. I've been laying down the base color for this Panzer II, and that's a German gray, and I've done that with Tamiya German gray, lightened slightly with a little bit of Tamiya sky gray. And then over that, I've lightened a few of the panels, just kind of a cloud pattern, adding a little bit more of the sky gray to the German gray mix. With the base gray on, I can now add the first level of decals. These German crosses came from my spare parts box. Nothing really fancy here about the decals. I just added a little bit of Mr. Softener liquid onto the area where I wanted the decal to go on, patted it down with a Q-tip, and then finished it off with a little bit of Mr. Setter. And I use the same technique on the turret when applying the numbers. And once the decals were completely dry, I just use a sharp blade, score around where the vision ports are, because I want to be able to display those as open. Before I get too far along here, I want to take care of these tracks and just get those kind of set up and out of the way before I get onto all the heavy-duty painting. And as I showed you in the first episode, this kit comes with magic tracks, and I said it kind of tongue-in-cheek when I was doing my unboxing, but I really do enjoy magic tracks. I generally just make little runs of 10 links, glue those together, get the next 10 links, and then once I have my runs, I just start gluing them together, and then I'll wrap them around the wheels, the road wheels, just to get the general shape, and let that set up for a little while, and then I just pop everything off, and I'm ready to go. So with all those out of the way, now it's time to have some fun. I gave the entire model a couple of light coats of AK heavy chipping fluids. And my intention all along was to do chipping in the traditional manner. The hairspray method, where you use a damp brush, scrub the areas until you start revealing the chips in the sand color camouflage. But as you'll see, I kind of changed my mind halfway through, or in some ways kind of forced change my mind halfway through, and I started using a different method. But in the meantime, I painted the desert camouflage using AK colors. And since I will be chipping these through, I'm not real concerned about real heavy coverage, because that actually just makes the chipping process more difficult. And as noted on the original reference vehicle, the sand color was just sprayed around the original turret numbers and German crosses. And there you have it. So now I have my base color gray, I've got a level of chipping fluid, and then the camouflage color of the sand. And this would have been a good time to show off my model using that new spinning platform, but I forgot about it. Oh well. And now it's on to chipping. And rather than doing what I usually do and start on some very exposed place, I decided to go ahead and warm up a little bit on some of these road wheels and the drive wheel here. And it's the same process we've gone through before, where you just use a brush that's moistened with water, do some scrubbing, and over a short period of time, it activates or dissolves the layer of chipping fluid between the gray and the top layer, and little flakes start to peel away. I then moved my attention to the hull and started chipping on this corner here. And again, this is the traditional method using water, but as you can see, a couple of things are going to start happening here. Well, the first is, I'm not getting a lot of great chips using the water. For whatever reason, it's just not activating for me. Well, one of the great things, I say that jokingly, of building models for these videos is that there's really no hiding. I get one chance to do it, and you get to see it, how it works out one way or another. And one of the things that was not working out was the chipping using the water or the hairspray method. I look at the drive wheel as an example. The chips that were produced using the water, well, while it worked on the drive wheel just beautifully, the process did, the type of chips that it made, I wasn't really comfortable with those to be on the upper hull of the model. I was looking for something, an effect that was going to be a little bit softer, more abrased or sandblasted in appearance. And secondly, since the water wasn't necessarily activating the chips how I'd hoped in the first place, I went ahead and turned to using lacquer thinner as my chipping medium. And I use that term chipping medium kind of loosely because really what I'm doing, or what lacquer thinner does, is dissolves the paints. So basically, I'm using a brush that's very lightly moistened, almost dry, with lacquer thinner on it, and just tapping just enough to pull off the top layer of the yellow sand color without disturbing the gray color underneath. Now, this is not a new technique for me. I've used it on a number of models over the years, so I have some practice with this, and I have a pretty good understanding of how it works, the touch that I need to have, and the amount of lacquer thinner to be on the brush for it to work out properly. But that isn't to say that this isn't a somewhat risky technique. Well, actually, matter of fact, it's a very risky technique. The real risk here is using too much lacquer thinner. So you don't flood the surface. That's the worst thing you can do. And you really want a almost nearly dry brush. And then it's just light, just barely kissing the surface to pull off the paint. And as you can see, I'm continually cleaning my brush. I want all the old paint and the lacquer thinner to always be clean on my brush. And once again, I cannot stress enough how lightly I'm tapping this model. It doesn't take very much effort at all for the paint to be removed. The good news is, here on live video, that so far, so good. Yeah. Everything's working out kind of how I want it to. I'm getting those soft, scuffed edges rather than defined chips. And of course, the same technique was used on the turret. Again, just very lightly moistened brush, very, very soft brush strokes, just tapping and dancing over the surface just to start to remove some of that top layer of paint. And with any sort of weathering or chipping technique, again, it's all about putting the effects in the logical places. So here around the ring, the commander's ring here, I'm chipping that out pretty hard because, of course, that's going to get a lot of wear and tear and expose the dark gray underneath. And I would imagine that the area around the commander's hatch as well, on the turret roof, that'd be fairly heavily worn as well. And one thing to note when you're using lacquer thinners to do this type of work is that because you are basically melting the paint off, it can change the surface texture a little bit. It makes some little bit of inconsistencies. So here I'm just using a little bit of 2000 grit sandpaper, just lightly over the surface, just to knock back any of the imperfections. And so I think that will do it for this episode. We've gotten quite a bit done. The next episodes, we will continue adding some markings using stencils, and we'll get on with weathering, especially concentrating on using oils. If you haven't done so, I please ask you to hit that like and subscribe button. Also, I have started a Patreon page, and the link for that is below in the description. If you like this channel and the content, please consider supporting it through Patreon. As a Patreon subscriber, you could look forward to seeing quite a few longer form videos where I take a deeper dive looking at different techniques. I also post regularly progress photographs of the projects on the bench. And of course, the message board is always open where we can get together and chat about our projects and help support each other in our modeling. And with that, I think we're about ready to close up shop on this episode. So look forward to the next episode next Tuesday. And until then, happy modeling and thank you very much.